see things happen. I mean that they actively engage with what they see, that they, like a biblical or a judicial witness, give testimony to what they see, except that their testimony takes the form of their artwork. But why artists? Well, artists have historically played a really important political and social role. They bring our attention to instances of injustice and values gone awry, and I think they're able to do this because they have access to large groups of people, which makes their art highly visible. And we care about their art because it's aesthetically pleasing or interesting in some way or another. And by engaging us, the viewer, in their testimony and their artwork, we become witnesses to the events that they have seen. So for an example of somebody who's an artist as witness, I'm going to talk about Tim O'Brien, who was this Vietnam War veteran, and he turned into an author when he finished the war, and he wrote The Things They Carried, which is essentially a compilation of semi-fictional accounts of what he experienced in the Vietnam War. And he says this in one of his stories. Stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for eternity, when memory is erased, when there is nothing left to remember except the story. So what do we notice about this quote, first off? Well, it's really pretty. He uses aesthetics, we're drawn in by his language and by the imagery that he's evoking with his words. So I think he's also speaking to the power of stories and the purpose of stories. You know, he's talking about memory and how memory is preserved within the text. And I think that that's very true because, you know, he talks about his dead comrades and how they died and the experiences they shared together. And as a reader, we share this experience as well. We, again, carry his stories and are witness to his experience. William Kentridge is another artist that I'd like to speak about. He's from South Africa. He's an animator. And he was witness to basically the progression and end of the apartheid government in South Africa. And he says this about his work. I've never tried to make illustrations of apartheid, but the drawings and films are certainly spawned by and feed off the brutalized society left in its wake. I'm interested in a political art, that is to say an art of ambiguity, contradiction, uncompleted gestures, and certain endings. An art and a politics in which optimism is kept in check and nihilism at bay. So what I think William Kentridge does in his work is really represent a moment in time in South African history. He made most of his artworks in the mid-90s, and apartheid ended in 1994. And for those of you who don't know, apartheid was a really racist, separatist government in South Africa that made black citizens second-class citizens and sort of elevated whites over them. And it was pretty destructive. And in 1994, there was a moment of reconciliation as the apartheid regime was sort of ended. I'm going to take a moment to sort of speak about William Kentridge's process and how it's like very evocative about the time in which he created his art. So William Kentridge is an animator, and this is a still from one of his animations. He's a charcoal animator, so that means that he draws an image, erases it, moves it slightly, erases it, moves it slightly again, and erases it. And the thing about charcoal is that you can never really fully erase the previous image. So when there's a motion across the screen, like a piece of paper floats from one side to the other, a path is left in its wake, sort of an after image or a shadow of where the paper was in the beginning and where it is in the end. And I think that this is really apropos to the moment in time in which Kentridge creates his art because it's sort of at the end of the apartheid movement. But, you know, the sort of long-standing political impacts and social impacts really still exist, and the shadows of what that government meant to the country still exist. In this particular image, you can see Kentridge, a self-portrait of Kentridge, trying to bridge that social gap created by the apartheid regime by literally looking into the eyes of a black South African woman. And I think that what his animations really speak to is the idea of moving forward but remembering the past as well. So, can only obscure artists and authors be witnesses? No way. Time for a pop culture reference. American Psycho is a book by Bret Easton Ellis, and it was turned into a pretty popular film, and it was directed by Mary Herron. American Psycho is about this guy, Patrick Bateman. He was a Wall Street sort of power player in the 80s, and he's really handsome, he wears great suits, he gets hot girls, he gets, you know, reservations in the best, most exclusive restaurants. He is what a lot of people aspire to be. But underneath this, like, handsome facade, he's a psycho killer. So I think what Ellis is trying to say and what is conveyed in Herron's movie is that, you know, you can have a nice facade, but something sinister is definitely brewing underneath here. It's very much a critique of Wall Street culture and sort of instances of greed and value and, or lack of value. And I think that though Bateman is a murderer underneath his facade of being handsome and successful, his friends aren't really good people either. And I think that really speaks to a general corruption of Wall Street culture, which is, you know, very relevant today. So all these artists are really different. They're pop culture, visual, they're literary, but what they all share is that they are very representative of the time in which they created their art. They all very much are products of the situations that they're critiquing. So ultimately, I think what we can take away from their artwork is a new understanding of our own society, a new way of looking at the world ourselves. I think that through viewing the testimony of artists, we can become witnesses.